Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
And to the brave hearts listening out there, welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
Get ready for some real-time relationship woo and wisdom
from the front lines with occasional tantrums and tears
about how breaking rules, blurring boundaries, and tossing tradition can be catalysts for finding your truth.
Let's debunk the fairy tales we were told as children and create a new map for life.
Yes, Disney can go fuck itself.
If you're seeking permission to choose your own path,
freedom is the new F word, people,
and want to feel less alone along the way,
we got you.
Please note, this is our side of the story. Our partners and metamors have their own individual experiences, and we do not speak for them.
Hi, good morning.
How are you feeling today?
I'm a little bit nervous. It's a big topic.
Pretty excited to dive in. I think it's very relevant. It's timeless, and we've had
timeless and timely. It feels that's like the lesson of this whole podcast for me this week.
Because basically what happened was that we recorded something 6 months ago and it's no longer relevant because we did an episode on marriage and divorce. And at the time I was married and we were listening to it and I was like, oh, this is woefully out of date since now I am consciously uncoupled and divorced. Yeah.
And what it really showed for me in recognizing that we were not going to publish that episode was, in choosing a life of transformation, personal growth, that this was a really beautiful metric of how much can change in 3 months, in 6 months. And listening to that episode, I almost didn't recognize myself. I was like, oh my gosh, I have changed so much since then, let alone like the label. Like my way of thinking about my relationship had changed so much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. And that does speak to the growth. And we're doing this in real time, right?
Yes.
So
this is the path we have chosen, which has no template and no map, but it does involve a lot of change.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's just dive into the big D word and do plenty of breathing in this episode too. So how did you grow up thinking about divorce? What were you taught? What did society teach you? What did your parents teach you? What did that mean?
I'd like to start with how I grew up with the idea of marriage, because I grew up in a loving family that was a little bit unique in that my parents were a former priest and a nun, Catholic priest and a nun. And what that meant was, one, the Catholic Church doesn't condone divorce, but that my parents had also very consciously chosen to leave a life that they were living, to get married in love and start a family in love. And so I never grew up with any doubts that my parents were going to stay together. Divorce was just never on the table. In fact, my dad, who was a lot older, he was 44 when he had me. I remember when I was 10 and he was 54, what I was afraid of was that he was going to die because he was so old. But that divorce was never going to happen. There's very little divorce in my family. And so when I grew up, I never thought I was going to get divorced, but I also knew I was going to wait to get married to make sure I found the right person so I wouldn't get divorced.
So I hear some very complimentary feelings and impressions about marriage and divorce. So would you say that the option of divorce was just an option? Or was it an epic fail if someone did?
I think there was definitely a part of it as an epic fail. And I think I was working around it. I didn't get married until I was 45.
First time.
So I was already fully formed adult. I had really lived my life and was making a very conscious choice. And so I thought, okay, I've married the right person, so I'm not going to get divorced.
Right.
It wasn't even in the realm of possibilities.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. So I guess you never thought you'd.
Not at all. In fact, the way that I see the arc of my life is that I needed to get married and I married the right person and I got married in love. But I also see now that I needed to get married in order to know that I needed to get divorced. I see divorce as a catalyst for my becoming.
Wow.
And I believe that if I was 49 and never had been married, I would still be looking for myself outside of myself.
Ooh, so powerful. Let's say that again. If you hadn't gotten married, you'd still be looking for yourself outside of yourself.
Yeah. I would be looking for the person I was going to marry.
Complete you.
That would complete me or whatever phrase you want to use there.
We're all like,
and so now that I'm 49 and divorced, divorce helped me turn inward.
yeah,
I would say the marriage helped me turn inward too. It's not just the divorce. Like once we got married, then, and it wasn't all roses and rainbows, that I started to look inward. My deepening spirituality came online. And then as divorce got into the picture, it was really like, oh, who am I became much more clear.
And do you think that the polyamory contributed to that journey and growth too?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yes, I would say that the three biggest catalysts for my awakening have been polyamory, psychedelics, and divorce.
Great. Okay. So I know one of your vows was to support each other's becoming. I mean, I've heard you say this. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes. This relationship has been, and still is, one of the top 3 most important relationships in my life, and continues to be that. And I'm going to go a little bit of a backstory is that I was the one that wanted to get married. And my boyfriend was really not sure about it, but he agreed to it. And he made the choice to be my partner forever because he loved me. And when we were talking about our vows, we really spent a lot of time on them. I know there's some standard vows. I would say that he almost spent a year figuring out what he could commit to for a lifetime. And what we came upon was supporting each other's becoming and being a springboard for each other's growth and awakening. Well, let me go back to your question regarding poly. Poly was part of that. Like, oh, like we cannot meet each other in every facet of our life. Other people can come in and the realization of that, which is like already like breaking the fabric of what a marriage looks like from like a cultural standard, was part of my understanding and learning and growing and pain and breaking of my own heart as I stepped into, oh, what is it that I want? Not everything is in this person. Where else can I get parts of things that I want met? Yeah. And so poly in that way was putting the mirror back towards myself during our whole relationship. Yes. What is it that I want? What is it that I need? Yeah. And what ended up happening when we were deciding to get divorced was this recognition that, oh, I had always been afraid, right? Like the fear that's lived in me, even though I was very consciously choosing poly and it felt and feels like the right choice for me. There was always a fear that he would leave me for someone else. Right. And that was like, that's where I had to like, okay, that fear is there. Can I be centered in that fear? And back to the vow, it was like, okay, like if he finds someone else, or if I find someone else that is better for us, that supports our becoming more, then I would support that. And then the reality that I settled on was, oh, what if not being together is what supports our becoming? And it didn't actually have anything to do with anyone else. In the end, it wasn't about poly. It wasn't about other people. It was about, oh, our relationship could be better supported.
You weren't together.
Looking different. In a marriage.
Right. I think that's the important part too, because you've spoken about, people can be together, but maybe the marriage container is not right for them. Do you want to speak more to the marriage container versus an alternative?
I do.
You're doing great, friend. Doing so good.
What I believe is that I just had a lot of conditioning around marriage and being a wife and having a husband and what all that was going to look like and should look
for
like.
sure. Those fucking shoulds.
Yeah, those fucking shoulds. And, we had navigated challenges with intimacy in our relationship. And I had really done a lot of work around, okay, that part doesn't need to be here in this type of relationship, and trying to navigate my way through the challenges that were present, knowing that I was still in love with this person.
So I think you're talking about the container of marriage maybe it didn't need to include intimacy, or maybe it didn't need to include this type of love. So you're redefining what the container of marriage looked like. That seemed like that's what you tried first.
Yes. Yes, very much so. And in the end, what I realized was that I like the marriage container, I was keeping myself small. It didn't have anything to do with him. I believe that he was 100%, this marriage was essential. This marriage is beautiful. Mm-hmm. This relationship was critical. I married the right person.
Because he helped you get to your becoming.
Right. And so in this way I say I got married in love. And then I also got divorced in love. Because what I realized in choosing divorce was that I had wanted to get married and he'd agreed. And in hindsight, I'm like, oh, basically I was saying, hey, I have a cage. I'd like you to come in with me. And he was like, I see the cage. And I'm like, I don't see the cage. He's like, I see the cage. And I was like, okay. But I'm like, will you? And he's like, okay, I love you. So yes. He walked into the cage with me. And then 3.5 years later, I'm like, oh, there's a cage here. I don't like this cage. And you say oh, the cage opens from the inside out. It was me realizing, oh, I'm the one that has to break us out of this cage because he made a commitment and he honors his words. So there was no way he was going to suggest divorce, or just because he made a commitment. And so it was my realization that in a way, I think that he freed me by getting married to me, and I got to free him and us by getting divorced.
Wow. There's a lot there. Yeah. And it is a cage. And I mean, I see it as that we do live in these cages. I think for you, marriage represented a cage. It doesn't have to be a cage, of course. For other people, it might just be a container that is right for you or is not right for you. I mean, you can think of it like Tupperware, different shapes of containers can be different for different types of people, right? Mm-hmm. But marriage wasn't the right container for you and he. So I think that's what I'm understanding from what you're saying. Handled this divorce differently than, or just with more intention, or maybe I should ask, how did you handle the divorce based on our cultural landscape?
I believe that we handled it with a lot of grace and with a lot of love and a lot of grief and a lot of sadness, and all of that was there. But as I've been saying, the container of marriage wasn't right for us. I still love him and feel loved by him. Family. Still my chosen family. And so in this way, it was the container was changing, but the relationship was that we were not forsaking the relationship, the friendship, the chosen familyness. We were forsaking that container. Right. And in that way, we've chosen to navigate, okay, what does it look like on the other side of divorce? And that's actually still work in progress, everyone. This is still real time.
You're very amicable.
Very amicable. We're also neighbors.
How's that going?
And it's good. We are very, very fortunate in that we happen to own a duplex, and I was able to move into the other side. And there's a real benefit and a cost, right? We still get to see each other. I can see when his person walks out after having spent the night, because I'm at my office doing work, and I'm like, oh, there she goes. Or if I've got someone coming over, we can see that. So we're
in each other's life.
Yeah. We're still intertwined in some degree, and in a way that oh, okay, I feel that. And right? We can also share butter and host friends over and parties.
And go together to a birthday party and be in the same room and be in the same social circles without a problem.
Because we still love each other. And I think that in terms of, there's a couple of things regarding like how are the cultural norms regarding divorce. One is like, I don't understand this, but a lot of people choose that like, oh, like I fell in love with a person and now I fall out of love with a person. And so now I don't talk to them anymore. And I'm like, no, I fell in love with him and I'm still am in love with him. And I'm going to make the effort. And it's still an effort to figure out how to stay in each other's lives. I will say this wasn't like my idea in the sense of like, there's a book called Conscious Uncoupling by Catherine Woodard Thomas that I read, and it's definitely a guidepost of how to navigate a divorce in love. And in this, like that to me was a value that's really important to me. I feel like I represent love as part of my essence. And so getting divorced in love was really important to me because I'm not forsaking this relationship that is still the most important, one of the most important in my life. And it will continue to be. It'll just look different than I thought it was going to look.
Right. And I think you said maybe in your bio or something like, 5 years ago, you would have considered a divorce an epic fail, like this divorce an epic fail. And now you don't.
So there's something funny about that, which is, as I said, I never considered it. I just didn't think I was going to get divorced. And then finally, when it like dropped into my consciousness that this actually could be it, and we made the decision, I remember doing a medicine journey. And as soon as I dropped in, I remember like, it was like, ding, 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 you win. And I'm like, what? And I have a vision of both of us being like bound up in like cords and like kind of like Hulk, where we just like busting out. And in this way, I'm not a video game player, but like this idea that, oh, here's the treasure in the video game that you needed to be able to find in order to get to the next level. And I was never going to look at divorce ever. Was never going to look at that. And so I was going to miss that treasure. And then I found it, like pressed the button, did whatever I was supposed to do. And then I was like, oh, I made it. Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah. It's so unexpected too.
So unexpected.
And I think that's a beautiful, I've never heard you talk about that. That's a new one for me. So I believe it was Margaret Mead that said, like, I've been married several times and they were all successful.
Yes.
I just love that quote, right? She's just like, yeah, it's like, that was a part of my life. And, I want to speak though to the idea that a lot of us were brought up with that, yeah, like you get divorced and people say, oh, well, they didn't try hard enough. Or like, especially if you do it quickly within a few years of marrying. And there's something to commitment that I still want to honor right here, like for all of us, right?
Oh, absolutely.
For sure that, yeah, it's not about giving up. It's just in respect to the Margaret Mead quote. I don't know how long she was married, but she felt like they were all a success because she must have learned something from it, enjoyed the experience, and now it's over and she's in a different phase of her life. And so you can do it however you want.
Yeah. And I think that is for people who are choosing personal growth, which I will say that he and I both
on that path.
are.
Yeah.
When you have one partner who's on a personal growth path and the other who's not, I actually think that is challenging. I think in our case, one of the reasons I thought we were going to like succeed is because we were both on a personal growth path. And that being said, it was my recognition of like, yeah, that is true. And what serves us and serves me, I'll speak to me, in this journey is not living together and not being married. And yet I actually think our whole lives we're going to still be connected. I believe that strongly. Yeah. And one of the reasons is because, well, I believe our whole lives we're going to still remain connected in some form or another. But I just, instead of thinking, oh, this is what marriage is going to look like, now it gets to be, oh, I have this former husband who I love and I don't know what our relationship is going to look like. We get to design it. Right now, we're neighbors.
Yeah. And I just want to touch a bit on what you said about, because I think it's a really novel concept that has been really hard for me to embrace, but I'm always working on it, is you said in your vows, our ultimate goal is to support each other's becoming. Now, you didn't know then that divorce could be, what could help each other's becoming. And you also said you were terrified of him leaving you, right? Which is, I think, I don't know, I can't speak for anyone else, but I definitely, when we started the poly, I was like, yeah, I'm totally terrified of him leaving me. And that seemed okay and normal for a while with the jealousy. But then over time, and with your help and with some medicine journeys and with Costa Rica, I realized I want to support, I love him so much, my husband. I want to support him being the most extraordinary expression of himself. And even as I say that right now, it's like a little bit shaky because I know that he wants to support that for me too. And recently when my husband went, on a medicine journey far away, and I knew he was going to have maybe some big aha moments. And I said to him, okay, like, I totally support you. I want you to become the most extraordinary expression of yourself, even if that does not include me in your life. And then I was like, no, I don't mean it. Never mind. Just kidding. Because it's really hard, right? I totally want him to be in my life. And if he's not happy and he's not growing and changing and like loving himself, then we shouldn't be together. And that is always to be seen. And we are together now and doing great and growing together, but life isn't.
Yes, life isn't permanent. You're growing together, but I would actually say more so than any other time since I've known you in these 5 years is that you're actually growing as individuals. And it happens to be that you're supporting each other. Like being together is supporting each other's growth as individuals.
Where you think before there was a time when that wasn't true?
Yes, I would say I'm not sure that you were both growing
at the same rate or.
Yeah. And let me be clear, I don't think anyone's ever growing at the same rate as a partner, but I think that there was a time when the marriage wasn't necessarily contributing to our growth. It was adding to our obstacles and conflict. Yeah. And we have worked really hard on that, repaired some damaged dynamics. And now, the home life we've created and our is supporting each of your individual growth. I think that was it. I think the home life before was detrimental, not supporting.
We have worked that out. And so, so I guess when I was going to say the brave hearts out there, like this is hard shit. Like it's really hard stuff to embrace and it takes practice and you may not want to do it, right? It's just, it may not be for you, but when I can tell you when you're brave and when you really turn into yourself and love someone enough to support their becoming, can be really beautiful.
And I mean, I was having a conversation the other day and something I just want to like call out about what I think is a little bit unique about us is that I do have a stepson who is in his late 20s, but in his late 20s and he's launched and is doing his own thing. And so we do not have small kids at home. Like we don't have to stay friends. We don't have to stay chosen family. Being neighbors is very much a recognition of we are choosing to stay in a relationship in some form or another. And my spirit son.
Nice.
Yes, always. I love him so much. So my spirit son, as I call him, because it really feels like he is my soul's son, is in his late 20s. So not at home. I only met him when he was 20. And so we've never lived together. And I feel like it's almost like hard to speak, like how much like love I have for him and how much I have grown through that relationship. And there's two things I want to mention. One is he and I have a commitment to him separate than his dad, which was I recognized even if my relationship with his dad didn't work out, I was still committed to being in a relationship with him, being the grandmother to his children. And like, that's my own devotion to that relationship. And I've articulated that. It's very clear to me and he knows that. But what I also realized is he comes from like a really like where I've mentioned, I come from 2 parents, a brother, nuclear family. Like very few people have gotten divorced in my family. I don't have much example of that. And there are no lived experiences of like step sisters and step
blended
siblings
families.
and blended families. My stepson has a different experience, and on his mom's side is a very beautifully large blended family. And of anyone I know, his definition of what means family is the broadest, most inclusive of anyone I've ever met. And when I was afraid of what it would mean if I got divorced, I was able to look to him to know that he would still love me and accept me in whatever relationships type I was in, because his definition of family is so
and that's
inclusive.
so different, right? From like what we grew up with and like the structure that we were tied to, right? He's already there in a sense.
He's already there. And in that way, he gave me permission to make a choice, which is divorce, that I would have been harder for me to make.
If he was like, no, you can't get divorced, that's going to tear apart our family.
Or he is a living example of that the definition of family can be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to a whole other topic of people just having chosen family that they spend time with.
Yeah. And I felt accepted for being me by him. And that helped me be more brave.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm so proud of you. I so love that you get to be a stepmom, right? Like what a gift. I remember thinking like, oh my God, you'd be such an amazing mom. Right. And like, that's not what, like your life path has brought, but you got this, like golden gift of your stepson. Yeah. So that's awesome.
I did.
So moving on to the post, like what is it like to be a divorced / single person in our society? Divorced / single woman. What is going to parties like? What is talking to people like? How have you managed the social, which side am I on? Who am I friends with? There's so much there.
So the first thing I'll say is that I'm grateful. I was taught a lesson in my college years where 2 friends of mine who were dating for a couple of years in college broke up, and it was really acrimonious, where like even 20 years later, they were not in the same like room.
Couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it. And I just remember, and I was really close to both of them. And I remember saying, I'm making a conscious choice that I am going to remain friends with both of you. Wow. I'm not choosing sides.
So insightful for you at 20.
Yeah, it was so like deep in me. And that continued to be a theme. Like even the college boyfriend, that when he and I broke up, we had all of the same friends we had dated for so long, that it was really important to me that no one ever had to choose between us. That we would be, if there was a party and both of us were invited, that it would be no problem. And in fact, when I'm going to get caught right here when my former husband, this is the biggest challenge, is I still don't really know what the label is. Ex doesn't feel great. Like, cause ex is like, as if like, oh, like an ex-husband means he's no longer like relevant to me. And that's not true. So former is what I've come up with at the moment.
Former partner, former husband.
Yeah. But in a way, he also still kind of feels like a partner because like we're neighbors and we're still like chosen family.
Yeah.
That's where I'm struggling, is in this label.
Good owning up to that.
And also just recognizing we're only a month and a half in to it. So I feel like, I'm not allowing myself to emerge.
Right?
Officially.
Yeah.
Officially.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. The divorce decree came through in March, but we decided in December.
Right. So it's early in a sense still of like trying to figure out what does this look like?
Yes. I would say I'm still a beginner at this new level of the video game.
Oh, right. You got to the next level and you're like, shit, what do I do now?
Yes. Exactly.
Broken ropes dangling from your feet, right? You're like, crap, where do I go? So do you call yourself single? Like if someone asked?
So so, okay, here's a question. Like there's a million surveys, right? And so then people say, are you married, single, or divorced? I'm like, why do I have to choose between those two things? And so I don't know the answer. Sometimes I put single, sometimes I put divorced. Depends on the mood that I'm in. But I would say when we like the value of making like, that no one has to choose feels like it's an important value between both of us, and that we are striving to be in ease together. So we are able to go to parties where we're both there. And that feels really great that no one is choosing. I'm in a really lovely, light, casual, fairy dust dating situation right now with someone. That's how I like to call him.
That a fairy dust dating situation? Like, I think that's a good forward phrase. What does that mean?
It means that for me, I know what I want right now, which is I want something that's light, that's fun, that doesn't involve processing. And I was able to get that with this person. And I'm not looking for a deep relationship. I told him I'm not really interested in talking much between when we hang out. Like I want it to be very like low maintenance, but I want the relationship to be in person in the moment, not like, oh, we're texting about each other's lives. Because that's just, I'm like, oh, I'm taking a break from processing in relationships right now. Like that's what I'm taking a break from. And so my fairy dust relationship is just like this like little bit of, like magic of we get to like have fun together. And then I'm not like building it into something else. It's like very in the present.
Beautiful. Okay. So that is what you're doing now.
And I feel that I'm very much healing, right? Like this relationship evolved into something different. I'm not going to say like the marriage was broken. Like I think anytime you're in a relationship, when it ends, even if it's a chapter that's ending, right? Like it's the catalyst. When I say it's a catalyst, the catalyst to me is like, okay, that means I'm looking at a mirror of like, what was my contribution? What about me impacted and was the contributing factor to this relationship and why it turned out the way that it turned out?
I see. So there's a lot of reflection and deep work in just this post period.
Yes. And so what I'm aware of is that I need to do all of that work before I can even be open to looking for a serious relationship again, because otherwise the patterns that I brought into that relationship will come into my next relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that you lived alone for a long time, before you got married. So you're used to living alone. You're empowered. I don't know, maybe you know how to fix things. Because I think this is, just speaking to, this is one of the problems I had early on in my life with feminism. I was like, okay, like I want to, sure. Like, so I remember just going to yoga training and finding out that like most people are either flexible or strong, but few people are both. That is an interesting fact. And I was like, okay, I'm flexible. Like I'm not strong. No, I don't have a lot of muscles. And in general, I was always kind of like, yeah, but like, isn't there always a guy around to like help me put the bike in the back of the truck? Like and there is. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, like falling into certain roles. Now, if I wanted to build muscle and like be able to lift the bike, I'm sure that I could, but I don't always necessarily feel like I have to. Right. So it's always just this danger of like, oh, I'm betraying feminism. Oh, I can't say that. But like, that's how I felt at the time. And I have since then, as my husband and I have looked at a different landscape of our life and been engaged with the poly, and we've been on our own paths as well on a particular connected growth path. Okay. Like I might not always live with him. Like I need to make sure that I can do shit around the house, that I can lift bags, or maybe at least I have some go-to person that can help me. And I'm speaking to this because I think for the couple people who I know in my life who are divorced, they live alone now and they don't love that. They don't, they like their alone time, but they don't like it all the time. And they don't like not having, like not sharing the burden of, oh, I can't get a hold of the bank. Oh, there's traffic. Oh, somebody broke into the garage. I mean, it's constant issues in a house. And I also don't, I love my time alone, but yeah, running a household by yourself is more challenging. And so what's been your experience with that?
Wow, there's a lot there in that question, but I would say short answer is yes, I love living alone. but I'm 100% not doing it alone. I'm going to just name a lot of things that I recognize I'm in a position of privilege in a huge way, which is that one, I chose to be neighbors with my former partner. And so he is still my IT person, and he is still helping me navigate, like the bricks are falling off one side of the building. How are we going to do this? And helping me with that. So I'm not alone in that way. I also, my whole life, and this was true before we got married, I still had the same handyman who has worked for me for 15 years. And I have another person who helps with a friend who is also / employee who's also helps me around the house. And so I have always felt the value in having the relationship with a man that I can call and trust, who will come and help me. I recognize that I have the privilege of affording that, but that it has been instrumental, especially as I have the Goddess Temple now. This is a bigger house that there's no way I could handle it on my own and with ease and grace. I could handle it.
You're choosing not to.
Yes, I'm choosing to have support with me. And I'm also choosing to live in community.
Tell me more about the Goddess Temple.
Oh, I do live alone, but I have a basement apartment that someone lives in. And I also have a guest bedroom that I'm renting out for like nights here and there, what I call for goddess getaways, for women who just want to spend a night away from their regular lives and come over. So in this way, this is an attribute of how my makeup is having people come in and out casually is invigorating.
You like that. And it's also inevitably making you feel less alone in case you at some point felt lonely or alone.
Yes. And what has also happened, I'm highly extroverted, but then my partner was highly introverted. And I did learn that I need to be alone more, and I'm much more comfortable being alone. So being alone is actually very nourishing, and I'm alone way more now than I was prior to getting married, where I was socializing all the time. And I really love that.
And to think about what I know is true for you originally is like, hey, well, we're going to be together, right? And we've talked about off-duty nights, like having time alone. Do you think you would have liked being alone this much?
No.
Definitely not, right? It's like the marriage and the divorce were like catalysts for, well, maybe the marriage and the poly. I guess I should ask you. For helping you be alone is my question.
Yeah. Being alone for me provides a spaciousness that it's so tangible. The benefits that spaciousness gives to my nervous system, to being able to like hear and listen and understand myself better. And I can do a lot of things, but I need that spaciousness to do it well. And this is where I think instead of being in my masculine of like, I'm a doer, I'm going to do everything, I'm actually recognizing that in my feminine I'm just being more. And that beingness is really important to my continued becoming. And I will also say that before we decided to get divorced, we had decided that I was going to move next door. Like me moving next door came, well, in my mind, it came first. Uh-huh. It's possible he has a different perspective, but so I was like, oh, can I live next door? So I was entertaining this idea of like, oh, we're going to live separately and still be married. And I think that is a viable outcome. It's not the one we chose, but I actually think that is a possibility that could have worked, because there is so much coming back to myself that happens when I just go to my own room. What I have heard that they're starting from an architect's standpoint is in some houses that are new houses that are being built, they are building them with actually 2 masters so that people can have their own space and it's not on a hierarchical.
Yeah. That's great. About any judgment that you got from other people about divorce, or is there anything you want to say about judging yourself?
I would say that the biggest judgment and fear came from within, came from myself. And that being said, I was afraid to tell my brother and I was afraid to tell my dad. And my dad's 92 and, is very progressive and still has his way of being. And I will say that telling both of them, I just feel really like lucky and blessed in terms of being seen, because ultimately they wanted me and they wanted us to be happy. And in explaining our relationship, my brother in particular was just like, I remember him saying, you guys are the most crazy out there couple that I know. Getting married is the most conservative thing possible that you guys have ever done. So it seems reasonable,
right.
But it didn't
wasn't
work.
right for you.
Right.
That's so interesting.
Right. And when he reflected that to me, I was like, oh, yeah, thank you for seeing me.
Yeah, really seeing you for who you are.
Yes.
And accepting you for who you are.
Yes. And then for my dad, him receiving his just wanting me to be in love, and just knew that as I explained it, he understood we were getting divorced in love. And it wasn't like one of us hurt the other or anything had happened other than this was the right choice. And my dad is extraordinarily accepting. And even though I had such a fear of that, and I know this about him, to hear his acceptance, I just felt so lucky.
Yeah, that's lovely.
And then in terms of, other friends, I think those were the two that were the biggest weight for me. And I think in hearing their acceptance, I was able to also lessen my judgment and increase my own acceptance. And then especially as I tuned into how I was feeling about it, and like almost immediately being like, here's the fear. This feels so painful. And then we make the decision, and then being like, back to like ding, 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 ding. It was like, oh, okay. Yeah. There was relief. And then just trusting that.
You got to the next level of the video game. Cannot think of a less appropriate metaphor for you. But.
I will also say this is that I used to think that my husband and I were models of how to be in a conscious relationship, and where we were communicative, working on ourselves, supporting each other, really intentional with all aspects of our relationship. And we were open and letting evolution and letting ourselves evolve. And now I realize that, I think we're supposed to be a model of how to show you can divorce in love.
Wow. Nice. Okay.
Yes. So what I want to share with the Brave Hearts is this book. I mentioned it already, Conscious Uncoupling by Catherine Woodward Thomas. And this is for anyone who is in a relationship, who is contemplating, you could be contemplating divorce. You don't have to be married even. You could just be like, oh, this relationship isn't really working. Should it be different? Because she starts the book out by saying, just because you're reading the book doesn't mean that you're actually the relationship is going to end. It actually might mean that it's like a way to come back together. But what it's really honoring and providing a framework for is how to untangle something that's not working.
And in strange fashion, I actually read only a third of this book because you mentioned it. And I was like, oh, I want to look at that, even though I had no plans of consciously uncoupling or plans of divorcing. And it's just great to read, the first chapters and be like, oh, in a sense, it was just another little permission slip to be like, oh, there's like a way to do this that's beautiful and intentional and works in our structure and is okay for the kid. And, and I think having that in the back of my mind is like, okay, like if this doesn't work, we can do that. Like we could get through that. We have the tools and the resiliency to just, follow that. It's just an alternative path to the traditional divorce that's in my head. Right. So, and that was just refreshing, and that's all I read. That's great. And for the brave hearts out there, do you have any homework for them?
I guess maybe like the homework, just from my experience, is divorce even on the table for you? Not saying in the relationship that you're in. It was not. I was not allowing myself to even entertain in my mind the thing that actually freed me.
Yeah. Well.
And so I'm just inviting you to reflect on, is there something that you are like, that's not even a possibility, that through a different perspective, through giving yourself permission in a different way, that might actually serve you. And again, I'm certainly not advocating divorce, but I am advocating for looking at yourself and saying, okay, is there something in me that's not in alignment? And I'm not considering the possibilities of how to get into alignment.
Just to let it into your view.
To all the brave hearts, if you have any questions for Janelle about divorce or anything else, feel free to visit permissiontobehuman.live.
And you'll see a number there. Leave us the voicemail and maybe we'll feature your question on the show. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Please take the time on whatever platform you're listening to rate and review or rant, whichever you prefer. And we look forward to seeing you next time.